most people completely mess up bulking. They either treat it like an all-you-can-eat buffet, or they're so scared of gaining fat that they never actually give their body the calories it needs to grow. And so they spin their wheels for years, they bulk, get too fat, crash diet, then repeat the same cycle over and over again without actually building much muscle. But when I work with clients, we run a very simple system that avoids all of that. It allows you to gain muscle for long periods of time without constantly having to diet and without getting sloppy in the process. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact framework I use with clients to make bulking simple. Let's start with the part almost nobody talks about, which is the priming phase, the step that everyone skips. Before you even think about bulking, you need to put yourself in the right position to gain muscle effectively. And that means starting with what I call a priming phase. This usually lasts 4 to 8 weeks, and the goal is simple. Get yourself somewhere around the 10 to 15% body fat. The leaner, the better. Now, this isn't about getting shredded. It's about setting up the environment where muscle gain actually works. Because when someone starts a bulk at that 18 to 20% body fat range, a few things tend to happen. Hunger signals are typically messy, insulin sensitivity is a lot lower, adherence drops quickly, and fat gain tends to accelerate. So this priming phase does a few important things. First, it resets psychological adherence. Dieting for a short period makes people far more comfortable with the idea of gaining afterwards. Secondly, it establishes baseline habits, training consistency, food tracking, sleep, steps, all the things that make the gaining phase work. And third, it improves how your body responds to food. Better nutrient partitioning means more of those calories go towards muscle. And then once that's done, now we move into the actual gaining phase. This is where most people go wrong. They assume that the faster they gain weight, the faster they build muscle, but unfortunately, that's not really how it works. Your body can only build muscle so quickly, and anything beyond that just becomes fat. So instead, we set 2 parameters. First is the maximum rate of gain. For most people, anything over about 0.25 to 0.5% of body weight per week is excessive. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that's about 1 pound per week. Secondly, we implement a maximum body fat ceiling. Personally, I don't like pushing people past the 20% body fat range, because once you go beyond that point, things start to become inefficient. Sure, you can still build muscle, but routine tends to slip and people tend to become a little too flexible in their diet and negative habits tend to sneak in. Now, let's say you start your gaining phase around 10% body fat. If you're gaining around 0.5% a week, that gives you roughly 20 weeks of productive muscle gain before you need to run a short mini cut. That's nearly 5 months of uninterrupted progress, which is far more effective than constantly bouncing between bulks and diets. Now, in that gaining phase, let's talk about the actual diet. This is where people tend to overcomplicate things. In reality, we need to get 3 things right. First of all, protein. You want somewhere between 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. That's more than enough to maximize muscle protein synthesis. Fats, keep that around 20% of total calories. This supports hormones, health, and overall function. And then everything else comes from carbs, and this is important. Carbs are essentially what drives training performance. The more glycogen we have, the better we're going to feel, the stronger our lifts will be, and the more tolerant we are to volume. And if your training performance is improving, that's usually a very good sign that you're actually building muscle. In terms of calories, the surplus should be small, usually around 200 calories above maintenance. Then you simply monitor scale weight weekly and adjust up and down. The goal isn't to purely force the scale weight up, it's to make sure that the surplus we have supports training performance and controls fat gain. And to touch on micronutrition very quickly, one thing I also push quite hard with clients is fruit and veg intake. A good rule of thumb is around 800 grams per day. This ensures you're covering micronutrients, fiber, and digestion, all of which play a significant role in long-term adherence and recovery. Now let's talk about the actual stimulus, because nutrition alone doesn't build muscle, and that's where training comes in. And when bulking, I tend to run moderate volumes, roughly 8 sets per body part per week. Stronger body parts can sit closer to 5 to 6 sets, which is around what we call minimum effective volume, and weaker body parts push closer to 8 sets. All of these sets should be taken very close to failure, with around 0 to 1 reps in reserve, and typically within the 5 to 10 rep range. This gives you a great balance between mechanical tension, progression, and fatigue management. For structure, I usually prefer either a full body or upper-lower split, done around 3 to 4 times per week. And the one thing I always emphasize is treat your isolations as seriously as compounds. A set of lateral raises should be attacked with the same intent as a heavy squat pattern or pressing movement. And then let's touch on recovery. If you want to grow, recovery has to match the stimulus. And that means getting the basics right. First is sleep. This is completely non-negotiable. Poor sleep disrupts hormones recovery and appetite regulation, so make sure this is spot on. Second is hydration. I usually aim for around 4 litres of water per day. With most of my clients, lightly salting meals also helps maintain proper fluid balance. And finally, I like people to structure their day in a way that supports recovery. Mornings should include things that prime the body, so movement, sunlight, and caffeine timing. And evenings should shift towards parasympathetic activities, so lower light exposure, relaxation, and winding down. This is what actually allows you to recover from training. Supplements are the least important piece of the puzzle, but there are a few things that are consistently useful. The big three I tend to recommend are creatine, vitamin D, and omega-3. These cover performance, recovery, and overall health. And then after that, supplementation is usually just filling nutritional gaps. So things like magnesium and zinc, if your diet is lacking it. And the final piece, and most important, is data tracking. The more feedback you have, the more accurate your decisions become. So I like clients to track body weight, calories, training performance, weekly photos, recovery markers, because once you start collecting that data, adjustments become extremely easy. And eventually, once you approach that 20% body fat ceiling, you simply run a short mini cut. Bring body fat back down to the 12% range, and then repeat the process again. And that's really the key idea here. Muscle building is a slow process, but if you structure it in this way, you avoid the two biggest mistakes people make, which is getting too fat or never eating enough to grow. Instead, you stay productive year round and continue building muscle without constantly starting from scratch. If you want a simple training split and nutrition guide, I've linked my free 8-day course in the description. And if you found this useful, make sure you like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.